Today the Inns Brothers are going to bring you a video on how to put on samurai armor. One nice thing about samurai armor is, unlike their European counterparts, you can put on the samurai armor effectively by yourself. Most European armors require two people to put on. There's a lot of buckles and different kinds of snaps that require you to have two people that you just can't do by yourself, at least not in my experience putting it on. Samurai armor is a lot easier with two people, but you definitely don't need a squire. You can do it by yourself. The fastest I've ever been able to put it on is right around 7 minutes. I'm sure I could knock it down a little bit. The big thing when you do it by yourself is you need to skip a couple steps and do some stuff on the ground before you actually put it on. Makes it a little easier. But overall, samurai armor is very nice to have. And one thing that people keep asking me questions about is why have samurai armor? I mean, it's a lot more expensive and a lot less useful than modern bulletproof armor, even like the really high quality, like ultra highway polyethylene stuff that's still cheaper, like less than half as cheap as this stuff does. But the big thing is I love samurai. Like, I love Shin-Kendo, Kendo, Aijutsu, Aido. I've practiced all that kind of stuff, and it's just a love that I've had since I was 11 years old. And so when I had extra money laying around, I just thought that it was something I needed to purchase, and it's something that I'm going to have for probably the rest of my life, unless I upgrade to another suit that's more fancy, and even then I'll probably use it for just beating around. But it's something you can pass down to your kid. It's an heirloom quality piece. I think the other reason that I have samurai armor is pretty well captured by a gift that someone gave me. It's this shirt. Let me show you a close-up. So basically what it says is strength through evolution. And as you can see, there's a depiction of a club, a sword, a bow, some sort of musket, AK, M16, and then some M4 300 blackout variant carbine rifle. And I think everyone knows how to use, like, a lot of this stuff. There's the club on this side. Most people know how to freaking hit someone with a wooden club. A sword is what I practice. I've practiced for a long time, and I'm very confident in my abilities. I do quite a bit of archery. I'm not as good as I would like to be, but it's fun. This musket, I've never fired a black powder rifle. I eventually plan on getting some, I'm thinking right now a Lehman trade rifle, but I want to do this. I just have never gotten around to it. And I'm very proficient in these three, in pistols and shotguns and all that. But to become, history teachers always say that you need to remember history, otherwise you'll repeat it, right? But you also need to fully appreciate the entire scope of weaponry. It's all well and good if you're very good at using rifles. But if you're good at using the entire evolution of weaponry of humankind, it just speaks more to the character of it. I love weapons because I find that human beings are defined as tool users. And what better tool defines the evolution of humans than our evolution of weapons? So I want to be effective at every weapon here. And so being effective in swords means I should also be effective in the use of the armor that was used during that period. Without further ado, let's actually put on this armor. We're going to start with the shin guards. You always start from the bottom up, and as a rule, traditionally, you're supposed to put on the left of an item before you put on the right. This is the left shin guard. It's only attached to the body via two lacings. One goes just below the knee, and the other one goes just above the ankle. You wrap it around your leg until it's just short enough, and then you tie whatever knot you want. There's hundreds of ornamental knots. Typically, I just do a square knot because that's just what I'm good at. I don't care to do the ornamentation. And so now I'll show you that. But basically, this guy, you can kind of see more of a close-up this time. So I have the symbol. You can see this part right here. This is the part that goes on the outside of your leg, so that's why you know this is the left shin guard. And then you just make sure that the center ridge line is aligned, and this should be just above your ankles, so that way you have free motion. And this part should cover your knee, just barely. It's not going to feel like a knee guard, but because it's going to be separate, but that's how you do it. So once again, starting with the left leg, my knee is right here, and you want to put it so that way this ridge right below the knee cup is below the patella. You'll kind of feel where it fits naturally based on your muscles. You don't want it too high because it will grind right into that ridge below your patella. If you have it too low, then it's not protecting anything. So you have to find a happy medium, and then you just take your lacing and wrap it around a couple times. Generally, I tie the knot in the back, but it's a matter of personal preference. If you have an ornamental knot, you might want to tie it in the front. One thing is, because you're bent down like this, you will have to tie slightly looser because your muscles are in a different position than they'll be when you're actually moving around. So just keep that in mind. And once you finish the left one, you can move on to the right one. And then as you can see here, the knees are covered pretty well. There's the side part that covers the side of your knee from cuts. But this is what I was saying earlier. Like when you kneel down, let's see if I can change the camera. So when you kneel down, all your weight's typically on your knees, but here you can see the knees are separated by a good fist actually. So when you do this, it puts a lot of pressure. You can do it, but it does put a lot of pressure on the lacings and also right on that ridge line below the knee cup. So you can do it just fine, but it is a little bit annoying compared to other armors I've had. So next up in our progression, we have the thigh guards. These are our shoulder guards. I just like carrying them this way. Now what you're going to do is they're basically on a belt. And so you have this central point. This goes right about where your navel is, maybe just above it. And this allows it so that way these guys are lined up correctly at the bottom, so they're just above where your knee guard ends. And this makes it so that way you have the maximum amount of protection overall. So once again, my navel is right here. I'm going to put that belt portion just above it. And then you wrap around once, go to the front, and tie whatever kind of knot you want. Just a bow knot's just fine. So there's an option on these guys to where you can actually have some additional lacing coming out the sides, and that will wrap it down to your leg. Mine didn't come with those. I think they should have, but they must have forgot to. And it really doesn't bother me, but I think I might sew on my own so that way they actually hug my thigh all the time. Right now they have some motion, which is kind of nice because when you're moving around it kind of allows a little bit more ability, but really this won't restrict it that much, and I think it'll offer more concrete protection. So there's something you need to add if you prefer it that way. I'll probably do that. So kind of breaking the rules, the next step is not the torso, it is actually the arm guards. And this is probably the weakest part of the samurai armor. I think most armors in all of human history, that's been one of the weakest points, is being able to effectively defend your arms but still giving you the mobility to fight. And samurai armor is a little bit better than some, but it's definitely not the best around. The biggest problem is not so much the armor. The armor is relatively strong. It's kind of built like a kind of a scale mail fused with chain mail fused with some actual plates at the bottom. But it's how it's attached. It's not the best. It does give you good mobility if it's done right. But for me as an American, it doesn't fit my body right. I think it's just my shoulders are too broad. I'm going to show you traditionally how you do it, and then I'm going to show you how it is done. I do it. So basically how you're going to attach this is you have this large cup. And you're going to ignore this for now because this is what I added in. So you have this cup, it's put on exactly like a sleeve. And so you'll run your arm through it, which is sometimes easier said than done. Then once it's on all the way, there is, I already put one on instinctively, there's a loop at the bottom of the glove that goes through your middle finger. And then there's another one that goes through your thumb. And then you want to pull it up as tight as you can. And you want to make sure all your scales are lined up with where they would actually need to be used in terms of a sword hitting them. And then traditionally what you'll do is you have a strap that comes out right here across the front, and there is a like one coming out of the back. They are attached in the same way. And then what you'll do is you'll pull it across your opposite armpit, and this is the easy part with two people, but so you're going to tie the knot slightly in front of where you normally would. And you tie it like that. So now it's attached, it won't really fall off. I'll show you the reason I have an issue with this in a second. But then up here, you can see across the bottom, there's an interwoven lacing that you can use to tighten the armor so that way it's not too loose on your arm. And then once it's fully tightened, you have these two laces coming out that you will tighten all the way, wrap it a few times in both directions, and then tie your knot, which is always really fun because you don't have a left hand. So for the most part, grab it, do it that way. That's how I tie it. So that's traditionally how you attach it. And these are the problems I have with it. When it's comfortable, so there's not putting any kind of pressure on the knots or anything, it's too loose. So like if I'm just standing there, and especially if I'm just walking, or even especially when I'm fighting, it'll slide down. The torso armor, the shoulder guards does not change that at all. And it also, if I have it tight enough so that way it doesn't do that, it restricts my motion. Like I think it's more of it getting caught by pressure on the front and back of the armor, but I literally can't move my arm past this point when it's tight enough. They designed it so it slides, but it binds on the armor, and that's why you don't have freedom of motion. And that's my least favorite part. I like being able to move, I like being able to fight. If I can't move freely, then I die. It's that simple. And this is the thing that I dislike the most about samurai armor. I think they need a better attachment system, which is why I changed it. But traditionally speaking, once you get this thing down, it's all set, tightened, This is all how it's supposed to be. You do the exact same thing on the opposite side, except for it's going to go across this armpit. And it was designed that way, I've always been told, due to archery. Because this knot is nothing more than basically like a loose knot. It can be a bow knot, whatever you want. So when you're doing archery, you can literally just just imagine I'm left-handed. I would take my non-dominant hand and I would pull this cord, and then I could take this entire arm off pretty quickly with just 2 knots, and then I would be able to use a bow more efficiently, supposedly. That's their reasoning. My system, I cannot do that. It's attached to my body, but it gives me complete freedom of motion, and I'll show you that now. So what I did is I changed 2 things. The strap, the lacing that comes off the back, I made it considerably longer. I added about another, I estimate, 2.5 feet of just some black nylon rope. It's not traditional, but it's what I had at the time. The next thing I did is the topmost scale on your armor that covers your shoulder is this piece right here. Centered with that, I attached about 1 inch wide by about 2 foot long segment of silk, about tripled over, and then I did a sewing on there to make it so it's pretty strong. It's not beautiful, but it's pretty darn strong. I used upholstery lacing, and I can't break it. There's no way. And what that does is then I tie them together in just a knot, so that way it doesn't fall off my shoulders. Even if I have the bottom ropes really loose, this cannot slip down. And then if I tie this around the front as well, I use it as part of the harnessing system. And with this, it keeps it very secure and it gives me complete freedom of motion. So the biggest difference I made was I added these lacings. It keeps it so it fits my body correctly without restricting my movement. Using my system, you basically put this thing on like a shirt. Imagine this is the neck opening. Put your head through. It rests on your shoulders at that point. And then you can put your hands through the sleeves just like you would any shirt. And then this is the hard part. Basically, without this, I could probably put this armor on in all of like 2 minutes. This is where you actually need to get intricate. It takes time. You put both your hands through the holes in the gloves, so that keeps it secure. Typically at this point, I actually do it reversed, and I make sure that this form is covering the top of my arm, because it typically likes to sag to the side. So make sure it's centered, and you also want to have it back as far as possible centered, so that way this opening in your gauntlet is not like moved sideways one way or the other, and that makes it so you can't grip your sword right. You want to make sure everything's centered, and that ability is dictated by how the form is done. And then once that's attached, you're going to tie it just like I showed before, wrapping the rope around and tying a knot using your teeth, because there's no other way to do it really. And there will be some excess rope because of that, but I don't care. So that right arm is done, and you can see it's centered on my hand, and there's a big enough gap so that way I can hold a sword and I'm still protected. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side. So the next step is probably the hardest part, because it's all based on your feel of your armor. It has to be able to give you freedom motion, which is why it takes so long. Typically what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie just a simple little thing here just to keep from dangling. Then I take my front 2 straps, which are my short straps, and I roll my shoulders back as much as I am needed. And then I'm going to tie a knot, which is, you're going to tie a knot just overhand, and then you're going to do a loose. And this seals it, but it also gives you the non-loose end, like this. When I went untied, I just had to pull this, and it's done. But this guy is now pretty much anchored to the Y. And I use this, I run it down through the portion of the thigh guards that goes right above your navel, and then I can tie a little knot there. And this keeps it so that way it doesn't rotate back. This keeps it all centered in the front. Just like that. So after the front is fine and centered, you're going to take the other straps in the back, the long ones. And ordinarily, they're like this. The point of these straps was always to pull it across your back. So you have to make sure that they crisscross. And then when you do it, you can see as I pull it tighter, it pulls that back portion of the shoulder guards tighter together, which restricts your movement. So what you want to do is you want to flex your arms as far forward as possible, so that way you have freedom of movement. And then so that way you know pretty much where you need to be. And then at that point, you're going to tie that same half loose knot. So that way it's secured, but you still have a little bit of rope to work with. So this is my working rope. And as you fight, what's going to happen is it'll slide down just because it's only there really to keep those two back portions of the shoulder guards together. It's not really supporting any weight, so there's no real tension here, at least until you're all the way forward. And you'll fight a lot like this. Your body will be back, so it'll slide down. So what you can do is you can use this extra rope, and I tie just a little knot here. And I bring it up through, bring it back down, and as you can see, doing that pulls it up, and it keeps it in place, and then I'll also do the same thing. I'll secure it down below this belt line. So it's a really complicated mess of ropes, and I'm sure that eventually one day it might bite me when I'm sword fighting, but as of so far, there's nothing to catch on the inside of the armor, and when it's all covered up, it's protected and pretty secured, as I'll show you. But as you can see, I have complete freedom of motion, and as I'm just sitting here, it doesn't slide down. That's key. I can move, and I'm always protected. It keeps everything where it's supposed to be. If it gets past my shoulder guard, this thing is here to stop it. And when it was otherwise, it would just not be where I needed it when I needed it. The next thing that you're going to put on is your torso guards, which comes attached with the skirt. It's all done in a clamshell design. So as you can see, it hinges right at that center point. There's a knot there, but it's just decorative. The hinge is what does all the work on this side. There's a knot on the other side to match, and that's how that side attaches. And traditionally what you would do is you would put this armor on, and then you would have either work really hard to do it yourself, or you would have someone else attach your shoulder guards, the true shoulder guards. And I don't do that. It doesn't work for me. But here's another close-up of just that white armored piece that's extra neck protection. And then just so that way there's a reference point, there's two toggles on the front of the shoulder plate. This front toggle is what's used to attach the armor together and keep it holding. And then this side one is used to attach the shoulder guard. And this is the back shoulder guard. This is the hard part you can't do by yourself really, because it's too far back and you could grope around, but it's too slow, so I have an easier way of doing it. So traditionally you would put this guy on first, attach it correctly, and then you would have someone else attach the shoulder guards. I don't do it that way, but what you would do is you'd have it on, you would take the shoulder guards, and then there's the two toggles on the sides that I already showed you, and you put the long toggle through each of the openings, and that secures the guards onto the armor. Now what I do is I do this while it's on the ground, so that way I don't need to do it when it's on me, because really this part you can attach yourself just fine when it's on, but reaching back and trying to find the opening in the back toggle is too hard, and it just takes too long, and this is just a lot easier for it to just be prepared like this, and then when I put it on, I put it on and attach to my body and I'm done. I don't need to worry about then adding the shoulder guards. So once the shoulder guards are on, what you're going to do is you're going to take the right-handed shoulder guard, which is this guy right here, and you're going to hold it in your right hand. Then you're going to grab the right-handed attachment toggle with your left hand, and this will let you sling the armor around, just like that. And then you want to put the two toggles together. And once that's done, you're pretty much in the clear. You repeat this on the left side. Once these toggles are attached correctly, the last thing to do to finish attaching the torso guard is the string right here, which is the opposite of the joint, is you just basically put it together and tie whatever knot you want. This is a lot easier with two people because it's a very awkward angle and it's hard to get closed completely by yourself. But you tie your single knot and then tighten as much as you can and then bring it back through like that. And there's still a gap there, but it's about as tight as I can get. I can do it a little bit tighter sometimes, so it is a weakness, especially when you compare it to this seam, which is completely sealed. But something to keep in mind, two people makes it a lot easier, and then you can get on the next step. So this is the belt that the armor comes with from the armory. It's like it's a silk, but it's just full of cotton and it's really squishy, and it's not long enough. Like when you put it on, you can do you can tie up an ornamental knot. I'm just doing a square knot now. But you can make it look pretty, and it does serve the purpose of keeping the skirt from flopping around and holds it all in this correct position. But that's all it's good for, ornamentation for the display purposes. So I built myself a real obi. It is a lot longer. It is I think about 14 or 15 feet. And what you do is you put it on kind of like a traditional karate obi, if you've ever done that. Except for this one, you have to make sure it wraps around at least 3 times. And I start so that way it is on my left hip bone, and then I wrap it around 3 times. That's once. And it's really fun trying to keep the tassels out of the belt. They like to get caught up. And that's 3. And then I just do the knot that's traditional in karate and anything I've ever done. I don't know if it has a name, but it's the one where you put the right free end through underneath it all, and then you crisscross on the inside to give yourself basically like an elongated square knot, but where everything's held together still. And traditionally what you'll do is you'll put your katanas on last. So I'm going to do the rest of the video, and then I'll show you how to properly position the katana and wakizashi in the belt. And normally I don't really wear these, but it did come with some Buddhist beads, being as this is Usui Kenshin's armor. At least it's a highly customized variant of it. And traditionally what I do is I wear it across my left shoulder down to my right hip. I've seen it both ways. I just like it this way more. I think it frees up my swords a little more, but whatever is comfortable for you. So the next thing you put on is the mask and neck guard. I've seen many people, and I think it's also fairly traditional, to take off the nose guard, put the mask on, and then reattach the nose guard. I don't feel that's necessary. It's an extra step that I don't need to do. So I just leave it attached. I think it's easier. And so what you'll do is there's a lace across the back. You put it over your ears. And then there's holes in the side where you can tighten it down to kind of give it a more secure feel. It's not really important because the actual helmet is what will do most of the work. But as you can see, it just rests on your face. And the tightening comes later. This will hang free. So the big thing you need to keep in mind with the mask is these hooks. They're and then the bottom of the chin is what keeps it all attached. So next you're going to grab your helmet. I keep the ornament on. I've seen it sometimes where the ornament's put on afterwards. I just like to skip that step. Making sure it's aligned, just so that way it covers everything properly. And then drop your neck guard. The back of your neck guard anyway. And then I just there's all kinds of different methods. There's like hooks in here if you want. You can bring it up and around. Typically what I do is I just make sure it fits tightly against my chin. I have the cords run underneath these hooks, and then sometimes they can go up here if you want. I don't care. I just bring them underneath, and then I do a square knot right below the chin. Keep it all nice and tight. This keeps your mask on, and it keeps your helmet on. So this knot is pretty important. Then you can do all kinds of ornamentation down here. You can tie them behind your head, whatever you want. I just leave it dangling. And that's the helmet. And now your head's completely protected. So the last thing you do before you go into battle, well, you grab your wakizashi first. At least that's what I do. And there's 3 layers in here. You want to put it in the backmost layer so it's closest to your body. Basically there's the skirt lacing, the sword, the wakizashi, and then your belt starts. And what you want to do is you want to have it so that way the handguard, the tsuba of your wakizashi, rests directly in line with your navel. This will keep it centered, it'll keep it out of the way of most of your sword strikes, and overall it just gets it out of the way until you want it in your hand. The next step, you can grab the actual katana, and generally I've seen you put, so there's the wakizashi, there's 1 layer, then you put the katana through, so that way there are 2 layers holding the katana in place. This is the most secure method that I found, and it keeps everything out of my way until I want a sword in my hand. One thing that I like to bring up is this was kind of a nice looking katana, and the biggest problem I'm having right now is right here. You can see it's just destroying the lacquer, and what's actually happening is this portion of the skirt, when I'm fighting, is pretty sharp. It has those ridges that I showed you the close-up of, and it cuts right into that sheath. So if you're gonna do this for display purposes or whatever, and you have a really pretty sheath like I did, just know that it's gonna get destroyed. It's just the nature of the armor. But this armor is meant to fight with, not to keep your swords all pretty, so I don't care anymore. But that's just basically how you do it. So I had to zoom out a lot to get as much body as I can. I'm going to try and do some actual close-up panning shots of me wearing this armor. But this is what it looks like as it's actually worn. As you can see, for the most part, you're pretty well protected. The biggest weaknesses I'll detail in future sword fighting videos, but what you need to be aware of is you have no armor on your feet, which sucks, but really it's such a fast moving target if people are aiming there. They got other problems they need to be worrying about. You have a chance of it skittering off your thigh guards down in below your knees. Your knees need to be protected, which is probably one of my favorite targets, is actually targeting people's legs. They just don't think about it enough. They think, I need to protect my vital organs. But if I chop your knee off, you're done, if you know what I mean. And then your neck is actually very well protected, so this is not a big of a weakness as most people think. If you do stab right underneath the guards, you can get in and cut the neck. Like stab in here, cut the neck. But that's a weakness you just need to be aware of, and it's a fairly hard target. But one of the most popular places to target in most samurai confrontations is the underarms and underneath the actual forearms and biceps. Like the underarm pit, that's a nice juicy target. There's no armor here at all. It's pretty easy to hit too. And then if you can get a cut on the underside of the armor, there's nothing but cotton and silk protecting it. The front is fine, so that's good, but that's a huge weakness. You can see my skin. There's nothing there to protect it. So those are the major weaknesses. There's a few more, and there's definitely ways to counter it. When you know that you have 3 or 4 weaknesses, you can definitely kind of tell when someone's targeting it, and then you have counters developed to fight against it. That concludes this video showing how to put on samurai armor by yourself. You can follow the exact same procedure and do it with 2 people. It's a lot faster, a lot easier, because you have someone else to hold your plates in place and to tie knots for you. The only real difference is what order you put on these shoulder guards, but otherwise it's the same. I bought this suit of samurai armor because I'm in love with the Japanese culture, and I've been a practitioner of many of their martial arts for a number of years. But I freely admit that there's no practical purpose for this whatsoever. Even during a zombie apocalypse, I think there's other gear that would be more beneficial, easier to use, and maybe even more protective than something like this. So this is technically something you could wear in preparation for the zombie apocalypse. So this is the Inspo reminding you to prepare for everything, so you can survive anything.